So this is a continuation of part one of the week 4 lesson on using the tidyverse package and manipulating data frames in R. I felt like the mutate, filter, and select discussion was long enough. It warranted its own standalone video. And so this is sort of part B to lesson 1. Hopefully that's not too cumbersome. But in this case, what we're talking about is how to read in a data frame. And now in this case, maybe you know how to select the columns you want, but now we want to perform some sort of summary analysis. And so the basic approach for doing this in the tidyverse and in R in general is using what's known as the split, apply, combine paradigm. And so let's say you want to compute the average weight for different genuses in the animal surveys data frame that we're going to be working in. You might first split the data frame by genus. So now you have this list almost of data frames with one sub data frame per genus, apply some sort of function, in this case, applying maybe mean to the observed weights, and then combine that all back together because you don't want a whole list of data frames. You want one data frame that shows the average weight for each genus. So the tidyverse makes that really simple with a set of functions that we're going to introduce here. So to start with, let's go ahead and read that data frame we want to be working on in again. So in this case, it's the surveys package. So let's just, or the surveys data. So let's just call it surveys as the object. And we're going to use the write.csv function to store a surveys object. And we're going to find that in your course project folder. And so go to the data subdirectory. And if you hit tab, you should see a CSV file called portal_data_joined.csv, or you can type the same thing in again, portal_data_joined.csv. And if we run that function, oh, that didn't work. Why did I get an error message there? Oh, because I typed write.csv instead of read.csv. I think I'm getting tired. It's been a long day. All right, so in this case, we don't want to write a object. We want to read an object. And if you call str on that object, you will see the same data frame that we opened in class last week. You can toggle through that and see that we have about 35,000 observations of some sort of like mammal trapping and measurement monitoring. So in this case, again, what we're interested in is grouping by some variables and then performing some sorts of calculations. So the example in the tutorial is grouping by sex and then summarizing weight by sex of the observation. And so let's just start there. So we're going to use the piping feature again. So if you recall from the prior video, a pipe is made by combining a percentage sign with a greater than sign and a piping sign. And so we're going to start with the surveys object and pipe that into a function called group_by, GROUP_by. And then we're going to, whatever variable we put into the function call for group by is simply telling the tidyverse package how we want to group this data frame. So in this case, sex. And you can actually just run this, and what it'll return is the same data frame you've already looked at with an additional notation that says, hey, just so you know, you've told us to group this data frame by sex. If you call a different variable such as genus, GENUS, and you run that in the console again, it'll just say, hey, this is now grouped by genus. So let's return to grouping by sex. Now we're going to add a second pipe sign, and now we want to compute the average weight. And so the way you tell the tidyverse package to do that, the way you tell dplyr to do that is using the summarize function, SUMMARIZE. And so in this case, we're saying we want to summarize weight. And we've said already we want to group it by sex. So this isn't going to work, but let's just run it and see why. So what's happening here is we've actually said, I want you to compute the weight by sex, but we haven't actually given it a function to summarize by. And so in the end, what happened here is R simply took the same weighted observed for every row and we produced it. So within summarize, you actually have to call some sort of function, in this case, mean. So now we say we want to compute the mean weight by sex and nest that within the summarize function. If you run that, what you end up with is 3 rows, and it shows each sex observed in the data frame. So in this case, F, M, and actually a blank quotation mark, so sex was not observed. But we get a curious result. We get that the average weight for each of these groups is NA. So you probably already guessed why that is. In this case, it's that there are some NA values, and when NA values are fed into the mean function in R, it simply spits out NA again because it doesn't know how to take the average of NA values. So what we have to do is add an additional setting into the mean function. In this case, na.rm equals true. And so that simply says compute the mean of weight and then remove any NA values in doing so. And so if we run that value in the console, what's going to show up is those same 3 rows. So no sex, F for female, M for male. And then we're going to have a column that shows the average weight observed for each of those groups. Final feature here, and this is additional code that shows up in the tutorial, is when you simply call the function, it produces sort of a wonky column name. In this case, the name of the second column in the data frame is mean quote weight comma na.rm equals t end parenthesis. And that's not super useful if you wanted to keep working with this new summarized data frame. And so what dplyr allows you to do is you can actually name this value. And so we can say, I want you to summarize, and I want you to summarize the average weight by, we'll just say average weight. So avg underscore weight equals the mean of weight, getting rid of all the NAs. If you run that, what dplyr returns is that same 3-row, 2-column data frame, but this time the column name for the summary has the name you've assigned, average weight, instead of just being the original function call. One other feature to note is that when we're working with all this, you've likely seen when you run one of these functions in the console, you'll get a quick a commented message before the results you're looking for that say, hey, this is a tibble that has a certain number of dimensions. A tibble is simply tidyverse speak for a data frame. It's a slightly different type of object encoded in R, but functionally it's a data frame. It's just the tidyverse's way of handling data frames. And I think that's as much as we need to get into that for now. But just know if you see something referred to as a tibble, that's just tidyverse for data frame. And I think that's good enough. Okay, so what we've covered in part B here and building off part A is how to read in a data frame in the tidyverse, select the columns you want, filter for the observations you want, and compute summary statistics either across the entire values you observed or for subgroups using that split, apply, combine functionality. And so that's, I mean, ultimately like at least a large percentage of everything you'll ultimately need to do in terms of like basic summary statistics. And so there's, more complicated needs here. Maybe you need to compute these values across a whole bunch of different columns. Maybe you need to compute multiple values at once. So for instance, we can actually not only take the weight, we can call summarize within that same summarize function. We can type comma median weight, and we can call the median function on that same weight column, move the NAs again. And if we run that, now we get a 3-row, 3-column database where we have sex, and then we have 1 column for average weight and 1 column for median weight by sex. So again, that's just a quick example of how this can get sort of complicated and long quite quickly, but it's also a fairly intuitive and easy way of computing these sort of calculations. All right, be sure to let us know if you have any questions, and go ahead and give the challenges a shot if you can before class, and then we will come back to these challenges in class and see how folks do. Oh, actually, before I end this video, I forgot to mention the tally function. The tally function is the last function that is sort of introduced at this overview, and it's simply a way of counting. So tally is simply the dplyr version of how many are there of each of these things. And so we can actually call tally on surveys and genus. So if we open up the tally function and type the surveys data frame and then genus variable, and we run that, oh, it gave us a bad value. Okay, let's try that again. Group it by sex and then call tally. So in this case, we'll go back to using typing, and we'll piping. So we'll start with the surveys object. We will use a pipe, the percentage sign greater than pipe, group by sex, the pipe again, and now we'll call tally. Oh, and I typed tall instead of tally. So I totally forgot how tally works in this case. Tally is actually Deepler's way of simply telling you how many observations are in each group. And so it's sort of shorthand for count in this case. And so since we said group by sex, if you call tally on that grouped tibble or grouped data frame, it returns a column with the title of the column name N that simply shows you how many observations fall in each one. So my apologies for the confusion there, but glad we got it right. Again, let me know if you have any questions and give the tutorial or the challenges a shot. All right, thank you.